My name is Micah Baker, Whispering Warrior, and with me is
Aaron Cooper, straight and narrow.
we are interviewing Tim Gebhart, otherwise known as Packrat, and we we appreciate you setting aside some time to help us out with this.
I love to talk.
We've heard a few stories about it. So just kind of starting out, we want to get to know a little bit more about who you are and name, title, just some general information to start out with.
Well, I'll start at the actual beginning.
Okay.
My mother and dad met at Assembly of God Church, got married, went to the war, and I was the third child. They came home Sunday night from church, and Mom told Dad, get the suitcase. They went to the hospital at 5 o'clock the next morning. I was born. The next Sunday, I was in church being dedicated. I grew up in a nice Christian home, Assembly of God people, and I knew about God, but I really got saved. I comprehended when I was 12 and went to the altar and got saved, and did well somewhat during teenage years, and when I first started college and stuff, I went wild. But God was gracious to me and gave me a good wife, which we've been married 54 years now. She sees what she gets. She knows it. I've been trained as much as I can be trained. But she helped me to stabilize and to become really a Christian, a good Christian. And in 1976, we moved to Huntsville, Alabama. Started going to Central Assembly of God. Now, the first 3 years we were here, besides a full-time job, I was going to night school full-time, getting my master's degree. I needed the money, and VA paid me well. But when I finished my degree, my wife had been a missionette leader for 6 months. They had a combined missionette ranger leader uh, meeting, and she got back from it. She said she did not understand why they did that, because men gave up and gave their thing, which had nothing to do with them. Then they gave up, got up and did their thing, and which had nothing to do with the men. They could have had separate meetings and been done in half the time. But one of the things they said was they needed men to go in and be with the commanders for crowd control. We were running buses to Calvary Hill projects and bringing in 100 kids from the projects on Wednesday nights. And some of those classes, it was quit sharing gun, make sure the gun's loaded. So that Wednesday, I went to one of the commanders. I told him I don't know what the program is because I never saw it before. Always been in Assembly of God churches, but I was, that old before I ever seen anything. And they carried me in there and introduced me by Commander Gebhart, and I thought that was wrong because I knew nothing about the program. I was not a commander. And we had 25 boys in the Trailblazer outpost, of which most had come from the project. When they rang the bell to start the class, one of them went ballistic. My job was carry him in the hall so the other guy could try to do something with the other 24. This went on for about 2 weeks when I told Commander East, I can't do this. And he said, well, Pam, the problem is you just don't know what the program is. Which I had to admit, I did not have a clue what the program is. Because sitting in the hall with a kid is not a program. He said, we have a short training course. And he emphasized short. He said, promise me you'll take the course, and after the course, you will either stay or leave, depending on what you want to. said, well, okay, I'll take your short course. The short course was 13 weeks. One night a week for an hour and a half. Homework, a camp out, and first aid. And I'm thinking, you suckered me. But it went on, and I finally got the little kid where he was calm enough we could get him in the class and I could actually get into the class. Not much better than that because it was still whip, chair, and gun time when the classes started. The other guy I was in with, he had the camping section of the LTC only. So he really did not have much of a clue what was happening either. And halfway through my LTC, the other guy, he changed churches to get out of Rangers. Just left and went to another church. So I got 25 boys by myself, not knowing the program, but it actually helped. That little kid that I made friends with had been so belligerent, I made him senior guide and told him his duties was to make sure when the bell rang, they all got in formation and quiet. The bell rang. He told him get in formation. One kid asked him, when did God die and you take over? He cold cocked the kid on the spot. I had an enforcer. We had quiet. We were able to teach. I was so happy until that kid's family moved to Detroit. They left me. And that was back to whip, chair, and gun. But I came up, at the end of the time, I'd come up to the camp out, which we did behind Central on that hill behind them. Joe East was in charge of it, and he assigned me to teach firecraft for the camp, which I thought was kind of odd since I was a student instead of one of the instructors. But I did. The only thing I did know was I could make a fire. I was a pyro, so that was not a problem. I went there with what equipment I had for camping. I was glad it was summer because I had a plastic sheet that I put over between two trees and two hammocks that I had that I picked up from a dugout canoe in Bangkok, Thailand. And a slumber bag that me and my wife had picked up in San Diego when we were stationed there for a couples retreat. We had a council fire. We're looking south towards Lacey Springs, and I see the lightning and I hear the thunder. And the only thing I remember about the council fire is that tarp ain't gonna hold. No way that tarp's not gonna hold. I'll be sitting in my car tonight. But one of the leaders there had a message in tongues and the interpretation. It says there's a harvest white with boys out there. Are you going to go or do I call it? And I said, oh my gosh, why did I come? So while laying in my hammock that night, not sleeping, somewhere in the wee hours of the morning, I gave up. Told God, I'll do this. You know I know nothing, so you're going to have to help me. And after I graduated there, I went by the library, got some books on camping because I figured I needed to know something about that. And I also went by the Boy Scout store and got their field manual. Wealth of information on camping. And that started me out getting where I could camp. And that was 79, summer 79. Well, we had Larry Hubbard in the outpost. And Larry, which later on became one of the presidents for FCF, he basically told me I'd be less than pond scum if I didn't get in FCF. Which Joe said he was in, and he said, it'd be fun. You need to. Yeah. And so that time frame, they gave you a phase 1 and a phase 2 test to get in. The phase 1 was knowledge. You'd go up, and they had, I think, 10 different categories that ask you questions and have you do stuff in to show you had skills. And we did ours up at Montesano, and they started us off in the parking lot. We had to go in the woods, get our own material, and they gave us one match each, and we had to make a fire. And once you got a fire that they say were viable, then you would start down the trail, and ever so often down the trail, there'd be another man for another station to give you another test on another area. And you ended up in the picnic area of the park. So we gathered all of our stuff. They gave us our one match. They told us to start. Next thing I knew, they're telling me, put that out before you burn the woods down. So I was in front of the line. So I finished first, which didn't make any difference because you had to wait for everybody else. Plus, I had rode up there with Larry Hubbard, which was one of the testers, so I couldn't leave anyway. So I'm sitting there, and they finally all get straggled in, and they came up to us, the FCFers, and they said, "We need to have a powwow. You guys just sit here." I thought, this ain't good. This can't be good. So they went off and they talked a while. They came back and they said, "Okay, this is it. You can take the score you got today, or next week you can come to Central and get retested." And I told them, if I have not passed today, another week ain't going to help. Because I have put all the work in this thing that I can do. In fact, at one of the stations on lashings, the guy asked me how to do something. I told him. He told me I was wrong. I said, "Well, that's how it is in tinctures and camping." He said, "No, it ain't." And we opened the book and it was, and he apologized. So I was not worried about my grade, and I definitely knew another week wouldn't help. And after we went home, the guy I was with told me, he said, "Tim, you're the only one who had passed." So the next week, because of being shorthanded, it not being on the schedule, I was down there testing the other candidates to get in. And and the way they would do phase two, it was after powwow, the Friday night uh, evening service on there, and it went to wee hours in the morning. And back then, it was the Frontiersman Camping Fraternity, and it was purity hazing. It was the type of thing that you would wonder if these men are saved, and come to the conclusion they are not. But be as it may, and we were down at Triple R Ranch, Royal Ranger Ranch, down outside of Clanton at that time for powwow. It's 28 acres of hill. There's one flat spot which they do activities on, so everybody gets to camp on a hill. They had spigots coming up out of the ground for water, and they called you a rat when you were going into your phase two. You had to wear a red bandana around your head, and you had to carry your stalking stick in your back pocket. And one of the games that the kids would play would be grab the stick and chuck it as far as you could. I brought 10 sticks. Well, my mama didn't raise no fool. So I didn't care. That was fine. I was brushing my teeth that morning at one of the spigots. I was down on my knees, because the spigot being low. And this young buck walked up. He said, "You're a rat, ain't you?" I said, "Well, of course. I mean, who else has got a silly band-aid on their head and a stick in their back pocket?" He said, "I'm already in." I said, "Well, that's..." And he stuck out his foot and he says, "Tie my shoe." I said, "What?" He said, "Tie my shoe." I said, "That one?" He said, "Yeah." Well, the problem was he had already busted the shoelaces and it was down one eyelid and tied in a hard knot. Now, I don't do well undoing knots. So I took out my hunting knife and I relieved him of the knot. For some reason, he got irate about that. He said, "Stand up, old man." I had white hair back then. I was in the 30s, but I had white hair. I stood up. He said, "I'm going to remember you." I said, "I'm sure you will." And so the first thing that happened when we got at the mustering area, to get start with the phase two, he came over to me, whipped out his knife, and went down for my shoelaces. I had removed it. Well, I was planning on wearing the shoe. They didn't want to have to buy new shoelaces. Mama didn't raise no fool. I knew what was going to happen. And for some reason, that made him even more irate. Back at that time frame, they'd make up a concoction they would call Kickapoo Joey Juice. It was basically anything they could find and then some. Usually Tabasco sauce had to do with it too. But he poured a gallon of that garbage over my head. Now, by what I had heard, it was so foul smelling, no one could stand to be close to me. My sinuses were stopped up. I didn't smell a thing. It didn't bother me a bit. But at one time during the phase two, another guy done something wrong, and for punishment, he had to wear my shirt a while. That's how bad the garbage was. But like I said, I couldn't smell a thing that night. I was very thankful. And the game plan was you get 2 notches on the guys quick. And then you get them to do all kinds of fool things, eating worms and doing this, doing that. Well, I got no notches. No one could stand to get close enough to me to ever do anything. So I just kind of sailed through. I know we had one of the deals they did. They took a baling twine and they run it down through the woods this way, that way, around trees, up and down. And they took your bandana and they put it at the end of the string, and you had to get your string, your bandana back. Just follow the string, which was easy enough. And there at the end, they had this little blind set up, and they had one of the guys in a gorilla suit down. And so right as you're getting your bandana, he jumps out and yells at you. We had one poor black guy. He jumped out there. Next thing I see, he running that way yelling. And a lot of them did that. I got up there and he jumped out and I saw him and I knew it had to be this guy in a suit because there ain't no gorillas down in South Alabama. I just waved at him. That didn't go well either with me. But hey, I didn't care. The last event we had, they had a half-acre pond that was spring fed. But the pond itself was skimmed with algae, green algae. They gave us a styrofoam cup. They told us we had to get a minimum of a half a cup of water back to the cabin because we had an FCF cabin there before one group burned it down. We had to get it there and drink it if they told us. That was the last one. But they had FCFers out there between the pond and the cabin. If they touched you, you had to go back you drop your water and had to go back and get more water. And you had a time limit. If you didn't make the time limit, you got another notch. And they poked a pencil down through the bottom of each cup if they gave it to you. And I figured that ain't no problem. I stuck my little finger through the hole and stopped it up. I knew where the spring was, where the clean water was. So I went and got my cup of clean water, and I snuck back there without them seeing me. I got there right behind another kid, and the guy that was running that, he held up his lantern. The other kid's water was yellow. He told the kid to drink it. The kid looked at him and looked at the water and dumped it and went back to get more. He looked at mine. It had a couple of pieces of grass in it. He said, "You can dump it." I drank it instead. I was thirsty. And then they put us out out in the woods with our sleeping bag by ourselves for the rest of the night. And that was phase two. They tried not to fail anybody, but they tried to harass you as good as possible. But see, then the next year I got to be one of the guys. And over the years, we did some wild stuff. I know one year we had a Cathedral Cross had bought a defunct golf course right south of Birmingham. It had a little amphitheater, and it, of course, had water traps and such, which we built a monkey bridge over, which was neat because that thing was at least about 150 feet. It was nice. Of course, by the end of the camp, if you had a heavy kid, his feet was in the water at the middle because it kept getting looser. But it was great, you know. Well, that night we had one of the young bucks. We took a big stake, put a couple holes in it, and strung it, laid it on this kid's back, put his T-shirt over it, had his hands tied up, or looking like they were tied up. Brought all the rats around, and we had the FCF president down there, which was Larry Hubbard at the time. Larry was 6'4", 240 pounds. He was big. And another guy, and he's saying, no, he done it, and he's going to get the punishment. And they were arguing back and forth. We get all the guys all lined up. They know we're all lined up. Everybody's seeing it and hearing it and everything. He said, no, we're not talking about this no more. He took a red hot poker out of the fire, hit the middle of that stake. Of course, it sizzles because it's meat. The kid yells like he's dying. Larry looks up there. Get them rats away. I'm not ready for them yet. And so we all get moved back where we can't see. And then, of course, the kid gets to carry the steak back to his camp and have a steak that night. And we bring them down there one at a time and told them all the members has the brand on their butt. So bend over, and we'd bring that hot poker where they could feel the heat off of it. But we had a second poker that was an ice one. And so we'd bring the hot one up close and then pop them with the cold one. They'd yell like a Comanche. And then they'd realize, you know, that was not hot. They realized, they'd been had. And then we set them down on the bench there, told them to shut up, can't talk, and bring the next one down. And it was fun to watch the guys sitting on the bench because they'd be sitting there giggling the best they could to keep from busting out laughing because they know what's going to happen. They get to see what happened to the next guy. Of course, the last guy, he just got had. But all the others, it was wild. And we did wild things. I am glad they did end that. I like that they went to the fellowship and they went to the instead of phase 2, they have the Frontier Adventure and they do the training, really. You guys get training coming through now. I mean, what training you got, it was not at phase 2. Phase 2 was just pure harassment and such. And there's a lot of different things that we did during that time frame, which probably shouldn't have done it anyway. Stuff I thought was good. We had some of the things where they'd take your stocking stick and you played basically, Indians and such, where you had to sneak back and get your stick without them touching you and whatever, that type of thing. But that was good fun, clean fun and such. Some of the stuff is just purely hazing, but it was wild. And of course, one of the problems I know the first trace we had on the Springbok property, before the phase 2 people got there, we were talking, we had a whole bunch of young guys that were coming in that year, and we knew that we'd not be able to outrun. So we were talking, and they said, we really need to get some of their energy off of them before we really start. I said, well, I know how we can do that. And they said, what do you got in mind? And we had one guy coming in that was about 250. Now, I wasn't worried about outrunning him. There's no way he's going to be. I knew it. I knew he wasn't going to, he's not going to be no problem. We're going to have him gone quick. So when the group got there, it'd be a while before we did start the phase 2. We had them lash together a Sudan chair. Put the 250 guy in the chair. The others got to pick it up, and we ran them up and down the hills.
I just want to go on record real quick. The 250 guy,
Yeah.
that was my father.
Yeah, I remember. Now, I know some stories about him, but we did a sufficient job that where they were sort of pretty wore out by the time they actually got to start. But you have to be someone to use some initiative on some of these things and everything. But over the years, I've done quite a bit of stuff with Rangers and FCF. And the FCF, we've done quite a bit of things. In the early days, we used to do the opening ceremonies and such, and we lost it. We don't see it no more. We don't see the firelight like we used to have. Because we had all kinds of firelight. I know there at Triple R, we built the council fire in the middle of the pond, and we had a wire going through it, anchored in the pond, going to a tree, and we lit that with a fire arrow, which neat. It turned out good. And of course, we've done fire arrows several times, and we'd do the black powder where you would have them just pray over it. And of course, you hit the battery to the wires, and you got flame, fire. And we've done the magic thing, little brake fluid and chlorine, and sprinkle the magic sand in. And all of a sudden, it starts smoking and burning. We had one where we had Clyde Andrews come in with a torch on a creek standing in a canoe in his full chief outfit that he has with all the war bonnet and all that other. He just come down that creek. We had a rope on the front of the canoe so we could pull him in. And so he could just stand there holding the torch. And we pulled him inside and he got out, walked up and started the fire. And we used to have a stick of dynamite at one of them. We used to half scale Napoleon cannon at one too. We put that cannon in the ground straight up. Built it was behind the council fire. Had the council fire, and we fixed a burlap little cave. And me and LaDon Duncan was sitting in that cave in our outfit. We had a hammer beating on the rock, like we're, tunneling in, we're mining, we're digging a hole in there so we can put the powder. And we get there, there's the charge in it. Now let's like this and we'll get this blast going. I said, yeah, I put plenty of powder in there. You put plenty of powder. I put plenty of powder in there. We bring this here. And as we'd go out, they would flash. They had that filled in kerosene that they would shoot the cannon and flash that, and the whole thing went. We just had to make sure our timing was right, but we did. We managed it. That went real well and such. I know at one council, one kangaroo court we held there at Powwow down at Triple R, we had a children's pastor at Field Lacrosse named Rick Berlin, national full contact karate champion. And he handled straight arrows. Great. He had 100 straight arrows in his truck and steel. But this guy could do things that I could only dream about, his body and such. We had it all signed up. Larry Hubbard, he was the judge, and he had a Kentucky pistol as a gavel, but he had it charged. And we already had it in with Rick. Rick came in there, and he back-talked the judge that we couldn't do this wasn't right, blah, blah, blah. And finally, Larry says, one more outbreak from you, I'm just going to shoot you on the spot and get it over with. And while he's saying this, he's turning the pistol around and putting the cap in. And Rick says, "You can't do that." And he sticks up the pistol and goes bang, shoots shoots flame out, a foot or two and smoke. And Rick jumps backwards with his hands and his feet straight out, falls, goes completely limp. And me and another guy each grab an arm and drag him out. Those kids swore that we had killed that man. He spoke the next morning, but they still swore we killed him. And then he turned to the audience and says, "Any more questions?" Nobody said a word. But we did a lot of crazy things. We put some Roman candles in our council fire once. Had them setting where they'd shoot up. So after it had been burned a little bit, all of a sudden you had the Roman candles. Except for one of them fell and went sideways. And so we had shot up the others, and we were sitting there around the council fire doing a skit, and all of a sudden it shot. Got me right there in the pit of the stomach. Luckily, I had a leather shirt on, so it burnt the shirt, but didn't go through it. It sure caught my attention, but it didn't hurt me. It was different. But we had a lot of things, did a lot of skits and such that we don't see anymore. I wish we would, but I think times have changed and passed, you know. And I know one of the traces we had at Camp Ambassador, and we'd set up in the baseball field a course. You started off by blowing the horn, set a trap. You had three targets you had to shoot on the move. Then you had the hawk, you had the knife, then you had a 50-foot just a black powder target. You could stand and do it. Then you came back and you would trip the trap and sound the horn, and they took your time. Now, time was only used for tiebreaker, but we had one guy from South Alabama. He had a hair trigger on his gun. So he was loading his gun between two of the targets, the moving targets, and it went off. Nobody was hurt, luckily, but he wanted to recharge his gun. We told him, no, you only get one shot. You had to scare it away. So. And he went and he did not hit the bullseye on the target. Came back and he was sitting there talking with the guy running the course. He said, "I could hit that bullseye from here." And the guy said, "Well, you didn't hit it from 50 feet. How do you think you can hit it from here?" He said, "Oh, I could." "No, you can't." So they got in an argument. And so finally, the guy running the course said, "Okay, we'll find out." And he didn't start nobody and let the course get empty. He said, "Okay, load her up and shoot her." Well, the guy looked at it and he said, "It's a little bit further than I normally shoot, so I need a little extra powder." So he put some extra powder in. He took careful aim. He fired. You had burning powder 10 feet in front of his musket. He had a lot of powder. The ball only went 6 inches deep into the barrel. And he shot. He said, "I got it. I got it." And about that time, 10 feet above the target, this limb goes and just starts swinging because it got hit. And of course, he got laughed at real good, as you can imagine. But he did reload with a normal charge, and he hit the target. He didn't hit the bullseye, but he hit the target. He wasn't a bad shot, but he wasn't that good either. And we had a lot of that kind of fun stuff going on. It was a lot of fun back then. Because a lot of the stuff I've done was with strangers, but we go back and forth doing all that. I enjoyed all that stuff. I know I have more stories, but they just don't come to mind at the moment.
It's understandable. It's fine. We one thing that we like to go into the just kind of another side of FCF, which not many people really look at. It's the actual Christian aspect of it. It's the the side that is not as portrayed outside of the camps as it probably should be. But um, to you, what do you consider something that has helped you grow spiritually through FCF, Rangers, something at least in that regard?
Well, there, I have not found in my life anything like the fellowship and friendship I've gotten with FCF. I have the vast majority of my friends are FCFers, Ranger leaders and FCFers. I do have a few people I deal with at my church, but very few. Most of my people, and the ones we only have one couple we socialize at church with. They're old fogies like I am. But, my friends and such that I deal with is, Jim Dobbins, Franks, and Jeff Childers, Skippy, and those. Those are the ones that I have done the most with. Now, of course, I've seen a lot of the boys that I have taught in Lone Eagle and in Rangers that are now men that I still have friendships with. I'm friends with Jason Potter and Greg Potter and some of those. In fact, our FCF president right now, I taught him in Lone Eagle, among others. Several of the speakers we've had at the powwows I have taught at Lone Eagle, the Sasser brothers and such. But there is that fellowship with other Christian men. And the thing is, I felt that God called me to Ranger. And I have a burden for these kids. They're looking at things that I never had to look at. Shoot, I grew up. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers. We didn't have, you got a computer, you can get all kinds of films. It's out there. And a lot of it ain't filtered at all. And plus, in I took abnormal psychology as an upper division elective in college. In the textbook, homosexuality, transgenderism, all that was deviant behaviors to be corrected. In the textbook, this is what they had, and this is the truth. And now this world is trying to tell you, well, it's all right. God made you that way. You're all right. And it's not all right. God tells you it's not all right. It's not normal. You got an X and Y chromosome. You either have an XY or an XX or whatever that is. But I mean, there's only two versions. There ain't three or four. You only have one. Whatever God assigned you when you were born, that's what you are. You got the kids being brainwashed that this is it, that you can be one of them. You can just change back and forth, or you can be both, or whatever. And it's just seeming. It's just demonic. And you got all the drugs nowadays, all the junk out there, the pornography and all. Well, I didn't have that growing up. It just wasn't available, not there. So, I had a whole lot easier. Plus, I was born and raised in a semi-God family, so if it had been out there, I wouldn't have got close to it. I I really led a very sheltered life in a lot of ways because I was completely naive about a lot of that stuff and did not actually see really any of it until I got in the Navy, went overseas to the debauchery and such that's in this world. And I feel for the kids because they're going to have a hard time with the way it is. And it's going to even get harder. Now, I do know that God can bring to your remembrance things that you've been taught. That's one of the reasons I got the bright idea of the sweet tea and Jesus. I make a good pot of tea. I love tea. I grew up drinking it, loved it. And so at the camps, I'd make tea because I wanted tea. The men, they'd fix coffee in the mornings. I didn't care for coffee, so I fixed me tea. And it started very simple that I just made my own. And then I'd get people come, well, can I have some? Well, yeah, you can have some. And so it got to the point where at most of my FCF camps, I had people just coming all the time asking for it. And me and Jim Dobbins were talking about things to do during powwow, in the village and such. The first year we actually was doing our own thing and such. We that year we made 2 or 3 peach cobblers during powwow and gave boys some. We made a couple batches of peanut butter fudge, and we also we were taking flaky biscuits and would pull off several flakes, put a little dab of butter and sugar in it, fold it over, and we were baking it in the Dutch oven for the boys. And we let the boys make it. We'd pull off the biscuit part, but we'd let them, put it in, fold it over, and strip it down with a fork. And I had my 16-inch Dutch oven there on the fire and had pans, where we could stick it in there and cook it and let them eat it. And it cooked quick because it was so small. And we were talking, things that we could do for the next powwow. And I thought, well, everybody seemed to like my tea. So I got the bright idea and I fixed up sweet tea, and I have scriptures I had just written out on cards back then, a few little scriptures, and they could have a free glass of tea. All I'd do is read the scripture and tell me what it meant. Of course, I could also explain to them what it really meant, which, but I like the idea. Plus, if they read it, God can bring it to their remembrance. Years from now, He can bring it to their remembrance. And, you never can go wrong getting the word in. Never can go wrong. So I did it. It went well. And so I got Jeff Childers' wife's got all kinds of machinery for embroidering and all kinds of junk. So she fixed me a nice banner. And I just set up and did sweet tea and Jesus. This other guy gave me a whole bunch of scriptures, small, short ones, laminated. So they'll last forever. And I got 2 containers. I got one in, and they pick out one and put it in the other container. When they've gone through one to the other, I've been going through 14 gallons of tea during powwow. But hey, it was not supposed to open, till 8:30 this morning on the activities in here. But I've already given out 3 gallons of tea, and I'm using 8-ounce cups, not big cups. So I've had quite a few boys already. I set up. I know last year when I set up, I hadn't just got my tents and such up. I had boys come and ask if I had tea ready. I didn't, because I'd just gotten there. Well, this year we came Thursday. There's no one here. We got everything set up. And when somebody else actually showed up, I know I had tea made. I was ready. And they started, 1, 2, and I've had more and more come. Yesterday, Friday, when they started really coming in, I know one time I must have had 10 of them sitting there at once and all come up and such. I guess most of the outposts or whatever, which is fine and dandy. And I've told them, you can have a second glass. All I got to do is read another scripture. Hey, That's what I'm here for, you know. Get the word in them. God take care of it. You plant the seed and God take care of the rest of it, the harvest. But I'm not, you know, I'm old and physically can't do much on a lot of things. I'm still good health, but I can do the sweet tea in Jesus and it seems to go well. The kids seems to love to hear my stories too. So, you know, get a new batch every few years, so I can do it. I got plenty of them
Yeah,
about all kinds of stuff.
one of the things that you brought up a really good point about how society's changed over the years and how the boys they need someone to look to. Now, in my experience, I've heard a lot of different people express that there's always that one in a million kid that's just different than the rest. Um, and I just want to get your opinion on this, but to you, what what have been a couple boys, or what has been specific boy that has stood out to you most? That is like gone against the grain, been that one that stood out.
When I was first in Rangers, I ended up with a kid. He was at odds with his parents. He had a continual chip on his shoulder and a complete cut off my nose to spite my face kid. That is his attitude. He had problems at school. He had problems at home, but he was a good kid inside. But no one was going to get close enough to him to find out, I don't think. And we hit it off. I'm a little odd myself, but I know for, I guess, I guess we had him about 5 years that he was a ranger. He'd call and he wanted to talk. I'd go pick him up, take my three kids, and we'd go up on Montesano and hike the trail. My three kids would be in front. I'd a lot of times bring their bicycles, and I just tell them, just don't get outside. And we would walk the trails, and I would talk with him, and about stuff. He finally graduated. His mother says that I was probably the reason he graduated. He joined the Navy, went into nuclear, spent a few years in the Navy, got out, become an EMT, but every time he came to town to visit his folks, he'd call me and want to go out and have coach. And then when he finally, well, he's in he may be 50 now, but he has ended up electronic engineer, saved, and here in Huntsville. I know when his dad was his dad was stupid, what he was. He had 2 years to retirement in the Army, and they cut him from what he had done. He'd been some kind of technician. They made him an artilleryman with the guns. He didn't want to do that. So he got out of the Army instead of going 2 more years and get a retirement. You can see where the kid got the cut off your nose to spite your face. And he wasn't saved. Now the mother was. She'd bring the kids to church, and he didn't care if she brought them. They just gave quiet Sunday morning such. So he had banged around. He finally ended up joining the reserves and getting the time in to get a retirement, and did okay. But there at the end, after all, they had two kids. Both those kids were out. In fact, his sister, my wife, had missionettes and worked with her a lot too. And she ended up a nice Christian woman, good Christian family. And the old man got saved finally, which is great. But I know when he'd gotten cancer and he was terminal. Right before, when he got the cancer, that's when Tim McFarland came back home, back to Huntsville, I should say. Got a job in Huntsville because both parents were in bad health. They needed help, and he came back to help it. Lived with them, and took care of them, plus doing his job. So when the old man was terminal, he was in the hospital, and they said he probably won't come out, or if he does, he just come out to die, hunger. So he called me and asked me if I would go and make sure that his dad had really gotten saved, which I did. Of course, I was at their funeral, but and I'm glad to say he did. He was witnessing to the nurses and such that come through, which that's a good sign. Good sign. I talked to him. We went up there and talked a lot. I feel that he did genuinely get saved. And he knew he was going to be meeting his maker soon too, so that couldn't seem to stay saved. And then when his mother was dying, they called, and I was at their funeral. But many times he has a crisis hit his family, he always calls and asks for advice. And I did a lot with Kyle Huxley. He was younger. He he had problems getting stable for a while. And I'm glad to see he has gotten stable and become the man of God that he should have been in the beginning with. You know.
So you just mentioned Kyle Holsey being a man of God.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to you to be a Christian man in today's society?
I don't think the society makes a difference. You're either a Christian or you're not. You've either decided that your Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ, and what he tells you is what you're going to do. You will all have trials in your life. Satan will always be after you to get you. Over the years, what he has used has changed, but it's still the same old fight, and you have to have the same determination that and this is what I'll do. You have to have the attitude as the three Hebrew children had before Nebuchadnezzar. You can kill me, but I ain't changing. I ain't changing. Uh, I realize you have a whole lot of different stuff on your plates than what I have. But that doesn't mean it's any more or less of a challenge to live as a Christian. It just means the challenge is different.
Yeah, the one thing that I've grasped over the years is, I mean, the ultimate example for a man is obviously Jesus Christ. And he set that example for taking the responsibility to do what he needed to do in his life. Um, and he set that example. And to me, that's what I believe sets the nature of a true man, just taking up responsibility no matter what it is you're facing.
Well, once you're saved, God has a plan for your life from the beginning. You get saved, he has a plan of what he wants you to do. Of course, you have a free will, so you may or may not do it. But if you look at the parables that Jesus spoke, he spoke about the talents. He gave some 5, some 2, some 1. Because God has given you different talents, different abilities. Some people are able to do a whole lot. Some people are not capable of doing a whole lot. Not that they don't want to, is that they do not have the end to do that. Some people can work with their hands. Some people can work with their minds. Some people can do both. It's the way God has made you physically and such and mentally. But he has given you tasks that you're capable of doing. And he rewarded them by being faithful in what they did with what they had. And to whom more is given, more is required. If he gives you 10 talents, he expects you to use 10 talents. If he gives you 1, he's only expecting you to do 1. But he gave the same to every one. Their faithfulness is God. Now, I have some talents God's given me. I try to use them, but there are some talents God has not given. I will not join the choir. They do not need me up there squawking. But I am capable. Well, I ended up with a bachelor's degree in accounting and an MBA. I help with the with the with the contributions at church. Nobody know. Well, very few people know that I actually do that, and I really don't care. But that's something I'm capable of doing that needs to be done. So I do it. I do a good job too. We have a food box ministry at the church where we get food from the food bank and we box it up and we give it out. Now, the food we're getting is from USDA. USDA has requirements of accounting that you have to do. You have to maintain an inventory. You have several other requirements you have to do. You have to maintain the receipts and all this, this stuff. Well, that's what I do. Nobody wants to do it. And I can do a good job at it. It's not hard for me. I can do it. I have done it since around, I guess around 2004, I took over the food box ministry, me and my wife. And over the years, I have done all the books. I was retired, so I was giving out the food boxes on Thursdays. And I had people there that wanted to give them out on Saturday. But I had a lot of Saturday activities with the Rangers and such. And so another guy, quote, took over the ministry, and I became a helper with it. And of course, what I did was all the books. Of course, I go down, I'm there on the Wednesday when we get the food and get the box. Back when, before the cancer and the surgeries and restrictions, I would load boxes, but I can't pick them up no more because of weight restrictions. But I still go down and I take care of all the books every month. I can do it. And I know I'd been in charge of the food box ministry 2 weeks when we had our first inspection from the food bank. I had no training. And by their regulations, I should not have been in charge without the training, which they're very lax on getting the training after the fact. So I got wrote up one side down the other because the guy I replaced, which was the outreach minister, he didn't care for new books. So he didn't care. He didn't do them. I just didn't do them. So they sent me to a class. I learned how. And the next time they came by, they sent a letter to my pastor how great my books were. And I know a couple of inspections ago, we had two new women that was in that position that did the inspections. You're supposed to have current and the back 3 years of books. You're supposed to have the temperature reading. You got to have at least one day a temperature reading every day. You got to have your inventories for every month, and you got to have your invoices for current in the last 3 years. And she came in there for the audit. Of course, they set the time for when the audit will be, so I was ready for it. And I have a folder for per year for each one of those items, sitting there. And so she came in and she wanted to see my inventory. She wanted to see my records. I asked her, well, which one you want to see first, the invoice, the temperature, or the inventory? She said, it don't make any difference. I said, well, there they are. I had them by year, and there's your. She looked at the other lady and she said, ain't this pleasant? I said, what do you mean? She said, most of the time they just pull out a box and they're all loose in there. if they're all there. And every year, USDA from Birmingham comes up and audits a sample of the people they service. And I had one guy said they always pray that they'll audit us because we have our books. And I've been audited by USDA twice. And each time they sent a letter saying, congratulations, your books are all great. Well, it's not rocket science. And it's something I'm capable of doing, and I do. And of course, I took care of the books for FCF for 22 years.
Mm.
And I decided, they were worried I'd gone through cancer and some of that other, and president called me, wanted me to write down everything I did and how. And Melba, my wife, she says, Tim, you need to give this up to some young guy. You can just train him now while you're alive and be done with it. And I thought, yeah, I need to turn this over to someone else. So I retired from that, and they gave it to another guy. But see, I was here to be able to train. I trained him much as he wanted, and make him on call if he wants to talk to me. I'm capable of doing that. Then, of course, the sweet tea and Jesus. I'm pulling in. Well, he ain't a young buck anymore. He's turned Tim Church.
Mm.
I'm pulling him in to train him how to do sweet tea and Jesus. I'd like to see it. If God so, I don't know when God's going to care. I'm at the age where if I fell over dead, you guys say that's sad, but you would not be greatly surprised. I mean, there's a lot of people younger, like Steve Mathis. He fell over dead, and he wasn't quite 59. And he was in great health, a lot better health than I am. So, if I fell over dead, there's not a whole lot of people would be greatly surprised. And I'd like to see it last after me. Someone know what to do, and they can have all my stuff to do it with. I told Melvin to give it to him, whoever the sucker is.
I'm glad you kind of brought that up, passing the torch to the next generation. Uh, but one thing is that we would like to know is what is some advice that you have desired to pass on that would help them in their walk, either physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally?
Consistent Bible reading and prayer. there's a lot of deceivers out there. They'll take scripture, but they add to it. And if you do not know the scriptures, how do you know they added to it? And there's people being deceived because they are ignorant. They have never read the Bible. They do not know what the Bible really says. And the guy says, this is what it says, and they believe it. They're being deceived. But if you have read the Bible yourself, you will know what it says. You will know the guy has added to it or taken away something from it. I mean, we got a church here in Huntsville that's got a lesbian pastor. They say you can be lesbian or gay or all this stuff and still be a Christian because God loves everybody. Well, God does love everybody, but there's consequences for not doing what God has said. Now you have to know what God has said, and you got to believe that the Bible's true in the Word of God, and you need prayer because we need all the help we can get, and the one that can really help us is up in heaven. We got Christ as an advocate between us and the Father. And we need the Holy Spirit in us, and we need the Word in us. I lucked out. I fell into Bible reading by mistake. Well, what had happened? I was in California in junior high. Our pastor was a full-blooded Sioux Indian from Wyoming. But every year he had friends there in Wyoming, had ranch. He'd go there for a week. They would go 2 days by horseback up in the mountains. He'd shoot an elk and 2 deer, because that was the limit. Dress them out, because he was a butcher. They would hard freeze overnight. They didn't have to worry about that, because it was 40 below at night where he was hunting. He would come back, and every January, he'd do an elk dinner as a fundraiser for the church. With the first one we went to, and he said, anyone who read the Bible through in a year can eat free next year. For the next 3 years, I paid nothing. But it got me to Bible reading. I do not know how many times I have read through the Bible. Because even after I moved, I continued the Bible reading. If you read 3 chapters a day and 5 on Sunday, you'll finish the Bible in a year. Now, for the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, I'm not sure how many, the pastor of our church has bought this little book calendar that he's handed out. It's daily Bible reading. You read something in the Old Testament, you read something in the New Testament, you read some in Psalms and a proverb every day. At the end of the year, you will have read the New Testament twice. You will have read Psalms twice. You will have read Proverbs 12 times and the rest of the Bible once. And I've done this the last about 4 or 5 years. I don't know how many years it's been. Years, and some of this just kind of fog up in my mind anymore as for exactly when. Some of the stuff I know when it actually happened. Some of it I'm not sure when it happened. You know, but I've done that for years. But if you have the Word in you, you can't go wrong. You can know if you're being deceived or not. But if you've never read the Bible, some guy, especially some guy that says he's a preacher, says this is the way it is. A lot of people believe it. And, that's sad. But, it says in the Bible there'll be deceivers in the last days, more and more. And they're around. They are around. And you definitely need to pray. You need to be in with your Savior. Right.
Well, we're starting to come to a close. Um, is there anything more that you would like to add? Anything else you'd like to share for those that may be reading or listening to just close this out here?
Well, I have a lot of stories, I have to admit. I've told some of them. I have a lot of stories that are just Ranger, not really FCF. You know, I have a lot of FCF memories and other things, which some of them escape me and some of them don't. Some of them are funny, some of them not. But I've seen a lot of men come through the years, and I've been to a lot of camps. I really love the fellowship that I have in FCF. And of course, I'm getting to the later stages of life as you can expect. And that's why we're the over the hill. Well, you got to realize our young buck's 68 now. But I don't know. I've got a lot, that to be thankful for. And at the moment, I can't think of anything else that I want to ask. I'm sure there's other things that I know there's other things I have. I know other stories that I have. Stupid people and other things. Well, I know the first trace we had here on the property, the FCF, one of the sections, they had them basically by sections back then, would be responsible for having a meal Friday night. And one year, the group that was going to cook it, we had rain hit. They did not have enough tarps to cover it. Now I had a 12 by 15 tarp. There was a painter's tarp that I had treated with what was that stuff? Thompson's water seal. Now it repelled the water, but it was highly flammable. And they wanted to borrow that to put over the fire. I explained to them about it. They said they could take care of it. I said, okay. They had it up over the fire, and then the rain quit. And it turned sunny. So, the rains are over. They don't need that tarp up there anymore because it was holding in smoke. And Hank Schramm, in his infinite wisdom, just cuts the guy wire on the one end. Of course, you cut the guy where the tarp just goes down into the fire. And before they could put it out, my 12 by 15 was 6 inches by 15
Mm.
and almost reached the other tarp. But Shrimp did a lot of work. He was a good worker, but he did a lot of stupid things too. That was one of the stupid things. Another stupid thing, he got in front of a tractor that was rolling downhill and tried to stop it on his own. That gave him a few weeks in the hospital. But he had the heart. He just a lot of times didn't have the knowledge he should have used with it. So they ended up buying me a brand new 12 by 15 tarp, which I used for years. It was a real one too. I mean, I made out like a bandit on that deal. But funny things, over the years that happened through there. Shrem was a character. He not died. He tanned skin, but he used plastic tubs to do it. He contacted the National FCF, said that he'd come to the National Rendezvous and demonstrate it, They asked him that they thought it would be great for him to do that, but they asked him, how all he did this. When they found out they used plastic cups, they said, no, you got to use, oak cups or something like that. You can't use plastic, not in the FCF village at National. And so he got kind of ticked at them and wouldn't go at all. And one territorial, he put it was a hide that he had skinned and he had tanned the hide and had fur on one side. Well, half the side. It was dry. I mean, it was completely ratty. It had big ball spots in the fur, you know. But he put it in the emissions auction with a minimum bid that was way above what it was worth, and no one would bid on the thing, and he got mad. And I'm thinking, I can understand that. Just give the money to a missionary. I wouldn't have had that. I would have took it back. If I'd bought it, I wouldn't have took it. It was bad. But he got offended with that, and his wife made ceramic, and he made a ugly ceramic cup for FCF with the five log fire and shit. The one he showed me, now he may have had some other ones that were better, but that thing looked like a 6-year-old had done it. I, I wouldn't have had it. But what he would do, a lot of times he'd come by, if you had like a jar of preserves there, he'll leave a cup and take the preserves, trade with you. Not ask, just trade. But he was a character. But his heart was in the right place. Of course, once he'd get into schools, showing them how to tan. Schools would have him. Well, one school banned him, Well, he was showing the kids how to tan, and he had a mink that he was going to skin and tan. It was dead. But the mink was female and had babies. So when he cut that thing open, out popped all them babies. And the little girls there got awful upset and run. And they never invited him back again. He couldn't come many things. But he just did some stupid things at times. His heart was in the right place, but his mind wasn't.
Well, Packrat.
Yeah, we appreciate you helping us out with this, and we
Well, if you come up with any questions you want to ask me, come to me. I'll give you an answer.
yeah,
It may not be right, but I'll give you an answer.
fully appreciate it.
Oh, you're more. So, it was going to go by alphabetical order to do the book reports. And it was a Tuesday, Thursday class, so it was an hour and a half long class. And I had gotten the autobiography of Admiral Farragut. I was reading it. I'd got to the point of the Battle of Mobile Bay. So there's still a little bit of the book left. But based on where my name was on the roster, I should have, this was going to be, I can't remember if it was Tuesday or the Thursday class. I shouldn't be able to make it to the next class. I'd be, no problem. I walk into the class, and the class is almost empty. And it was almost empty with the people in front of me. There's only 2 people in front of me. The first one got up, started. Instructor stopped him, asked him a question. He didn't know the answer. He said, "You did not read the book. You got a 0. Sit down." And this is 1/5 of your grade. The second guy got up, started. He asked him a question. He didn't know the answer. Told him, "Sit down. You did not read it. I'm giving you a 0." Within 5 minutes, the 2 in front of me are gone. And I have not finished the book. And and he said Gebhart, and I walked up there and I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do? Because I need that 20%. I said, well, I'm just going to tell him every nitpicking thing I can think of. I started out, and an hour and 15 minutes later, I come to the Battle of Mobile Bay. And I'm thinking, I had gone through all of this. The instructor interrupted me. He said, Mr. Gebhart, please shut up and sit down and let somebody else have a chance. I said, okay. I had a lot of people thank me because there's a lot of people after me that weren't ready either. Consumed all the time. I got a B. Yeah. He didn't give A. Half of his class, of all his classes, over half, he failed. He got called in by administration and they explained to him, you're too hard. You have to lighten up on this. You're just, it couldn't be that they're that bad. That, you have over half of them failing. It has to be better than that.
Mm.
And I got a B. I think because I could work and use something. I'd first started out in international logistics. I was doing CLISs, cooperative logistics, spare parts for foreigners. And I was looking at it. Every year we'd renegotiate the contracts with these foreigners. And we were buying a pipeline for them so they get the same service as the Army. Well, every year, you reevaluate. Well, does their pipeline need to be expanded or contracted? Now, if it's contracted, well, we bought this section of assets. What are we going to do with them? Well, the formula they were using for their for it, if it was underneath our economic retention, Army would take it. Oh my Lord, we're not funded to economic retention. It's just if we screwed up and we just got it on hand, we're not going to throw it away, but we're not going to buy no more. And that's what we were doing. So I rewrote the program, what it should do, to go to the OR, which is order executive. That's what you're funded to. So I did it, wrote it out. Well, I'm in international logistics. I got to get material management director to agree with it. So I came over and I briefed them, the people, and they came over with a woman that was a grade higher than me and two flunkies that were my grade. I briefed them. She said, I don't understand a word you said. I thought, you are dumb. I didn't say it. I just thought it. She said, will you brief my supervisor? He's an expert on this. I said, sure. So now I'm looking at her supervisor, her, and her two flunkies. I briefed him. We have a good conversation because he didn't know what he was talking about. He looked at his watch. He said, I got another meeting I got to go to. He turned to her and he says, he knows what he's talking about. Back him. And he left. She said, I don't understand a word, but I'll back you. Well, the supervisor said so. Well, my comm is only one of the major commands. You got ASCOM, ARMCOM, TACOM, ECOM. You all meet in St. Louis to go over this stuff. Now, I'm not the rep for IL, but I go anyway. I'm there at the meeting. And the first agenda item, because there's a whole bunch of them. First agenda item, the chairman said, this is what we're going to do. Now, agenda item number 2. I raised my hand. He said, what? And I said, we don't want to do that. He said, what? I said, we don't want to do that. He said, why? So I explained to him why we did not want to do what he wanted to do. Now, that was 8 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, The rep from Tycom says, I understand now. Gebhart's right. At 2 o'clock, the chairman says, I don't care no more. I am tired. I'm hungry. Well, do it your way. Let's go to lunch. At 15 to 4, we're supposed to leave at 4. The item I wrote came up. The rep from my cop, he gets up. He said, now, Gebhart wrote this. He's here. Let him explain it. I stood up. I said, did everybody get the copy we sent them? Oh, yeah. Did you read it? Oh, yeah. Do you have any questions? I just let it sit there, a little bit. I said, well, if y'all got it, y'all read it, you have no questions, I move it to be accepted as is. And it was. When I made it back to my com, I had a reputation.
For talking.
Well, the story went. I got the thing through without nothing, So that went, and shortly, it was little later, I got promoted into MMD, into a branch of MMD. And the deputy director started putting me on special projects. He would send me to meetings with the express purpose, making sure the proposal did not pass. And he never was disappointed. If you say committees is a great place to kill something. I did that till he put me on a special project. He finally put me on a special project that made from what we did to begin with, on the project. The general made a complete division of 15 people. But the division was put in a different office in MMD. And I went with the division. Now he's telling them I'm worthless, but he's given a grade higher than me to keep me. He offered 2 people to keep me. And the new people would took me anyway. I got away from him. So for 15 years I did shoot cost studies for spare parts. Hey, it's a job. But yeah, I had a reputation.
Well,
A big reputation.
They did not want to see me come to a meeting because they understood why I came to meetings. And these meetings had nothing to do with my job. But that made no difference. The deputy director would send me to the meeting.
mm-hmm.
I know I got moved and I was doing I worked the MMD side of the CLISs. I did MIPRS, which is interdepartmental purchase requests like the Marines or whatever, and budgeting type stuff. That's what my job was. I got a call from his secretary being in his office 15 minutes. Of course, I was in a different building than him. I had to go over. I had a guy in there from IL, International Logistics, that did MSAs. That's your maintenance support agreements with the Fort. He asked me what I knew about them. I said, well, I know across the hall from my branch, there's a branch and that's all they do. That's all I know. So he explained. They had a proposal which FICOM did not want passed. And he says, tomorrow you're going to Washington to a meeting to make sure that proposal don't pass. It'll be you and the guy from IL. He said, do you have any questions? Well, I got one. He said, what? I said, there's a whole branch up there across from me and a branch chief and all. Why ain't one of them going? He said, well, I got to send somebody to get the job done. But he wouldn't promote me. I had got as high as you're going to get on brains. The next step would be into management. If he put me in management, he couldn't send me to all these jobs. So he was never going to promote me. So that's why when I got the chance, I went with the new division. But it was interesting. I'd show up at a meeting and they'd say, "Oh gosh, he's here."
Whatever he wants, just give it to him, please.
Well, it depends. Most of the time is I'm not going to let you do this.
Exactly.
Well, we need to go find some breakfast because we need to eat.
Probably, yeah.
It's almost 8.